Hello, this is Randy with Excel for Freelancers and welcome to Pop-Up Calculator. I have reinvented the calculator into a brand new pop-up in which you can change the look and the feel of this pop-up calculator. It works amazingly well. We can also change the decimal here and enter the value. It's going to be a fantastic training. Let's get started. All right, thanks so much for joining me today. I've got a really cool training here. We're going to be showing you how to create this automated pop-up calculator. We're also going to show you how to change the themes. We're going to show you how to execute it and how to automatically take and delete characters from it. We're also going to be clearing. It's a fully functional calculator. And of course, we can also change the decimal to increase the decimal or decrease the decimal as we see fit. And then whatever value has been entered, we can enter that into the cell that we're working on. We've got a dynamic icon that changes so that we can launch this calculator wherever we are. And it's always going to launch below. If we change the colors, we can change any theme to 6 different themes. It's a really cool calculator. I can't wait to show you how we did this. If you take a look at this particular application, you'll see that this is the general journal. This is something I've created before in another training, so we're not going to go into that. I'm just using this as a background, as a template. It's a great general journal. I urge you to go ahead and see the training if you haven't, and I'll include the link below. But this is a general journal, something we did in the past. We're going to focus primarily on the calculator and how to create it. And of course, make sure you download this. I'll include the links down below. And along with our mentorship course. In fact, the mentorship has launched this month and I'm really proud. Students are absolutely loving it. I am teaching them how to define, design, develop, and we're going to show them how to deploy their own applications so that you can create a passive income stream using your passion for Excel and using your Excel skills. Showing that all to you while I design an amazing accounting application inside that program. It's an extremely comprehensive program. I hope you'll join us and get into the low launch rates. All right, so let's get started on the training. Thanks so much. So basically what I want to do is anytime the user clicks on a specific field that perhaps is formatted as a currency, I want this icon to show up. But if they don't, I don't want that icon. I don't want that icon to show up on anything other than a currency type. So that's the first order of business. How do we get this icon to show up on the left side of only currencies? Well, we do that into VBA because the reason I want it to show up is when they click this, I want to launch that calendar. And when they close it, I want them to be able to close it using this X or of course entering whatever value they have. So how do we get this icon? We're going to go into VBA. Obviously, VBA controls that. So how do we get that? All right, into the developers, and I'll show you just how we did that. Now, there's other code in here, of course, from the general journal, and I kept it just the way it is so you can see how it is. But we're going to focus on just the simple code that we are, which is this code right here. I'm going to put here pop up calculator icon. Okay, that's the code. And where is this code located? It's located under selection change. This is for the calendar. We've gone over that before, so don't worry about that. The selection change we're focusing on. Why selection change? Because when the user actually makes some type of a selection change, I want to know about it. I want to show that icon. Okay, so what are we going to be doing? Well, there's a few conditions. The one condition is they must make a selection between G8 and H999. What is that? That starts out here in G8 and goes all the way to H and then just down. So I've just included. So I'm only including basically this range right here. You can, of course, increase your range to anything you would want. But even if we click on a currency here, this is a currency, but it's not good because it's not within that range. So if it's not in that range, what do I want to do? I want to hide it. So if it's not else, then we're going to hide it. So what's the other condition? Not only does it need to be G8, but it also needs to have a certain format. And what is this format? That is the current format of those cells. That is so that we only show it on those formats. So if we look into here, we click on it, we go to home, and we look in the currency, we see it's currency, but we click on more number formats, and I'll drag this over for you. We go to custom, and we see this is where it's been copied and framed. You perhaps doing using different regional may have different formats. So you may want to copy whatever formats, and if you have multiple formats that you want to appear on, you would also use it an and or an or on that, so you can put in multiple formats. This is where you're going to get your format. This way the calendar only shows up into, so for example, if I change this to G7, this is not formatted. If we look on this, it's formatted as a general. So it's not, so if I change this to G7, right now we're including G7, and I click on this row, that icon is not going to show up because it's two conditions. One, it needs to be within the range of G7, which it is, and two, it needs to be formatted as a currency, which it's not. So it needs to be, both of those must be true. So we have the and, when you see and, both of them must be true. The target format, the format of the target cell must have this format here, and that's the one I copied. So those conditions, condition 1, target format, condition 2 here is the range, the user must make a selection within that range. All right, so once they do that, we're going to show this calculator icon. That's a macro that shows our calculator. If we right click that and go to the definition, it's going to go to a module called calculator max. And this is where I have all the calculators. Now I've given a few names. Let's take a look at some of the names that I've given the calculator. If we click on it and open it up and we right click or click on the entire shape, it's a shape base, we see it's been given the name of calculator. Also, keep in mind that down below is also something setting. There's individual shapes within this settings group, and they all have names. So when we look in our panel, our selection pane, and we look under calculator, we see also the settings group. So we have theme 6, theme 4, those are the different colors that we can change it to. And we also have the increase, decimal, and decrease. So we have multiple, and of course the setting background, which is that background shape. So we have those 9 different shapes within the settings. So keep that in mind. That is in a group in itself, and then we have the rest of them. All right, so we get an idea of the shape. So basically what I want to do is I want to show this pop-up calculator, but I also want to show it directly below the selected row. For example, if they select on this, I want to make sure that it's directly below, not anywhere else. And that's really why I like shape-based. I can place them very easily right below the selection, which is a really cool feature. And then we can do 8 minus 6 equals, and then we can just enter the value that we've entered just like that. So it's very cool calculator. So how do we get it to display? Well, let's look back in the module here, calculator max, and we're looking at the show calculator. No, sorry, we're looking at the show calculator icon. So how do we get that icon to be placed? Well, with sheet 1, we need to call out sheet 1 shapes. We're only focused on this shape. That is the calculator icon. That is the icon that if you look, we right click on this, we see the name of it's been called calculator icon. That is the name I've given to this little icon. So we're going to do a few things with it, not very much. First thing we're going to do is we're going to place it based on the active cell. We're going to place it to the left and to the top of the active cell. That just puts it right on the top left. Then I'm just going to drop it down a little bit, move it a little bit to the right so it's not exactly on that border. Move it a little bit to the right, which is a positive increment left. And if we're going to move it to the left, it would be a negative increment left. And then I also want to bring it a little bit slightly down from the top. To do that, we would do 1 increment top 1. That brings it down a bit. If we were going to bring it up, of course, it'd be negative 1. And then the last thing is we just have to show the icon. Visible equals MSO true. That is going to show the individual icon. All right, so what do? Now we've assigned a macro to that icon. So if we right click on this icon here, we go to assign macro, we see that there's a macro that's been assigned. And the macro is called show calculator. This is the macro that's going to run when we click on here. It's going to show that calculator. So let's go through that macro, and all we're pretty much going to do is basically just show this shape. And then I also want to make sure these settings are hidden. All right, and the cool thing is these settings can show or hide based on the same macro. So I'm going to show that to you. It's very cool. All right, so back into the code, and now we're going to be focused on the show calculator macro, show calculator. Again, this time with sheet 1, but this time we're focused on the shapes calculator. That is the entire calculator. And we're going to also be placing it based on the active cell. The active cell is left and top, and we're going to offset it. I don't want it exactly on the existing cell. I want it one row below. So to do that, we use offset. That's going to place it one row below. We wanted it one column to the right. We would put a 1 in here. So it would be and that's the top position. So the top position is actually one row below. And then I want to drop it down. I want to actually raise it up. Why do I want to raise it up? Well, because this group as a whole is a little bit larger, right? So as you can see, this icon is a little bit higher than the top. So I just want to raise it up a little bit. Otherwise it would be too low. It would be about here or something, or here. So I wanted to raise it up a little bit. So increment top -4 will raise it up actually. So we've done -4. And then the last thing, I want to make it visible. All right, so and then the last thing is I want to run this macro called calculator hide show settings. So if we right click on here and go to definition, we'll see all the way down at the bottom of the same module we have calculator show settings. And every time we launch this calculator, the actual settings are actually visible. So I really want to make them invisible. So every time we launch it, if you want to show your settings, you can. Let's say every time you want to click on your calculator, let's close it out and let's click on it again. And if you want to show the settings every single time, you can. All we would need to do is just comment out this top line of the code right here. Now, once we comment that out, it's going to show the settings every single time. I kind of left it empty, but you might want to. So now it's going to show it every time. So we close it, click on it, it's going to show it every time. For our purposes, maybe I'll leave it commented out because we're going to be using the settings a lot. And so now it shows the settings, which is kind of nice. But if you want to hide the settings, you can, or show it just with that macro. If we right click this little gear icon here, we right click and we see, I'm just clicking assign macro. It's off the screen, but you know what I'm doing. Basically, it's the same macro, calculate hide show settings. So when we edit that, we see the same thing. Basically, we're using the same macro to both hide and show the settings panel, both of them. So how do we use the same macro to provide two different options? Well, all I need to do is check the current status. If it's open, close it. If it's closed, open it. So the way to do that is all we need to do is just take one, for example, one shape within the group, the background, that's that rectangular background. I've named that settings back. That's that little background. That's just that rectangular background that's covering it. I want to check if that's visible, then we know everything else is visible and we can hide it. But if it's not visible, that means we need to show it. So we can use a simple if-then statements. If this is visible, that means the entire settings panel is visible. Then what do we want to do? Then I want to hide all the components of it. Now I can't hide just the settings as a group because it's part of a larger group. But what I can do is I can use the active sheet shapes. We can also use sheet 1. That would work just as fine. Shapes range array because it's multiple. And then all of the components of that, which increase the decrease indent, the increase indent, theme 1, 2. So all of the shapes, and then visible equals false. So what that's going to do is hide all the shapes. Otherwise, if it's not true, that means it's hidden. Else, in that case, I want to show it using the same array, but this time we're going to make it visible true. So that's going to show it. So this one macro will allow us to both hide and show it. So we can hide and show the settings based on the single macro. Okay, so we've shown you that. Now let's go ahead and show you a little bit more about this calculator. If I take a look at this calculator is made up of several components. And if we look at this is the visual basis of the calculator. So it's the screen portion of it that shows whatever you've entered. So this is connected to a specific cell, and that cell is called B10. So in your applications, all you need to do is assign it to a cell that's generally off-site. You don't necessarily need to see it. So B10, and that allows us to do it. So let's slide over and take a look at B10. Now here's the display here, B10. So as I enter items, you'll see that B10. As I enter calculations, it also is entered into B10. Now B10 is specifically, we don't want to create any errors. So if we enter these types of multiplication or settings, it could create an error. So 77 times 9, and then we do equals. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use another cell to calculate this. I want this cell to be text-based. So if we drop down here, we see that it's text-based. I want that text-based because I don't want to put the equals in front of it, right? And I want to perform these calculations, but I don't want to put the equals in front of it. So when I do 8 times, and I just want to continue multiplying until we clear it out. So this cell does the calculations, this cell does the display. So 5 times 5 equals, so what I did in this cell is I took the 5 times 5 and I added the equals, so that way Excel does the hard work of the calculations, and then all I do is take the results from the calculated cell and place them into the display. Then what I want to do is I want to take that result and put it in whatever cell we've selected. So if we selected this, let's do it again. So if we do 5 times 5 equals 25, then I want to put it in this cell. All right, so how do we do that? Well, let's take a quick look. The first thing we want to know is we have to understand that there's macros, different macros assigned to these buttons. So if I right click on an individual button here, holding down the control, right click and click assign macro, we see that we have calculator button 7, calculator button 7. Likewise, calculator button 8, and so on and so on. So each button has a separate name. So the macros are very, very simple in this, really, really simple. Let's go through them now that you understand a little bit about how that works. Okay, so we know we got hide calculator. We also want to hide calculator. There's 2 instances where we're going to hide the calculator. So this little X up here will hide the calculator. That's a macro that's been assigned to that X. That's going to allow us to hide it. And all we have to do is, again, hide the calculator, and then I want to clear B10 just in case, so when the calculator gets opened up again, it's clear. And also I want to clear the calculator. There's a macro that's been assigned to that clear button, and we're going to clear both B10 and both B11. So when we launch this calculator and we click on here, let's raise this up if we're not using it, and we right click here on the clear button, we can see under assign macro that it's clear calculator. So all that does is it clears whatever's in here, and then it also clears in B10 and B11. Clearing anything in B10 is automatically going to clear it in here, because this shape, this is just a text base. This is all it is a text shape, that a rectangle that's been connected to B10, linked to B10. Very, very simple. Okay, so that's all it is. Now, what else do we have to show you? So we also want to, one says delete the last entry. I want to be able to, if the user's entering items, let's unclick here. If the user's entering items and they make a mistake, I want them to be able to delete the last entry just like this. How do we do that? Well, all I want to do is really delete the last character of a string. We can do that with just one simple line of VBA code. Just in case there's an error, we've got on error, resume next in case there was an error. B10, remember B10 is the one we're focused on, equals the left, right? I want the leftmost, whatever the left of this is, sheet 1, the total text, and I want the length of what I want, the length. The entire length of what is in B10, the length of the string. If it's 10 characters, it's 10 characters. Then I want to subtract 1 from that. So that means I want the new result of B10 to be the total number of characters minus 1. Pretty simple. So for example, if we, let's go over that again. If we have, let's clear it out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, if I have these total 9 characters in there, and I want the left, I only want the left part of the first 8 characters. All I need to do is count the number of characters, 9, subtract 1, and do it. So that'll do it. And then if I do it again, it's going to subtract just 1 each time. And we can use that through this formula right here. The length minus 1 will get us the new result for B10. Okay, and then we have the divide function, and all we're doing in the divide, the multiply, the subtract, all we're doing is we're taking whatever is in B10 and we're adding a division. We're taking whatever is in B10 and we're adding a multiplication, or the times. Same thing with minus, same thing with plus. So when if we're having 26, let's clear it out, and let's add 10. If we want to add times, all I'm doing is adding times. 6. All we're doing is adding the 6 equals 60. So we just simply adding characters onto our text string. All we're doing is we're adding characters. So that's all we do for every single button, whether it's button 1, 2, 3, we're just adding the character onto that. Very, very simple. So we do that for all the buttons, and of course each button has been assigned to these macros. So it's really, really quite simple. Now we get into equals. How do we get it to equals, right? What I want to do, again, let's go. I want to take the equals and I want to figure whatever's in here. Let's say it's 5 times, let's clear it out and go 5 times 6. So what I want to do is I want to take whatever's in here and I want to add the equals, and then I want to do the calculation. So we can do that just very, very simply. So B11, remember B11 does our calculations. We're going to add the equals. Then the equals is going to be whatever is currently in B10. Then I'm going to calculate it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take whatever's been calculated in B11 and I'm going to bring it back into B2. But what if they do it? What if they do some kind of an error? You know, we always kind of mess up our math sometimes. So what if it's 9 times minus 6, 9 times, you know, that's not really going to be a helpful calculations. Equals, I want to let them know there was an error and put invalid formula. So you could do invalid calculations or really whatever you want. So how do we do that? All right, we do that through this. If there's an error on error, any kind of an error, you know, because we can't copy over, we can't use equals, we can't calculate it when there's going to be an error. So if there's an error, skip all of this and go here. If there's no error, we're going to exit the sub here. Otherwise, invalid formula, what I want to do, I want to show B10 invalid formula. I want to let the user know there's an invalid formula. All right, so we've got that covered. We understand how to do the calculations. We understand that B11 is actually doing our calculations, and as soon as it's calculated, unless it's an error, it's going to then show up, those calculations are going to show up in B10. 5 times 9, and we clear that out. 5 times 9 equals 45. So that calculation is going to be changed. Now I also want to add a decimal. I want to increase the decimals. So how do I do that, or decrease the decimals? Let me show you how I do that. Those are two macros that have been assigned, and those are the macros that are coming up next. We have one called increase decimal, calculation increase, and one decrease decimal. The first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that we cannot increase. I want to make sure when we're at the bottom. So for example, if we decrease the decimals here, I want to make sure we stop at 45, right? And if we increase, if there's no decimal, I want to add one. And if there's a decimal, I want to remove one. So we have to do a few checks. We can't just add zeros or deduct zeros. For example, I don't want to add a 0 here. I need to add a decimal, then a 0. If I click on here, I need to add a decimal. But if I click it again, I want to make sure there's no decimal. So I want to check to see if there's a decimal. If there's a decimal already, just add the 0. But if there's no decimal, we want to add the decimal and the 0, and that's on the increase. So let's look over that. On increased decimal, first thing we want to do is in string B10, whatever's in B10, we're going to check for that decimal. Is there a decimal there? If it does not equal 0, that means there is a decimal there. In that case, all I need to do is take whatever's in B10 and add a 0 onto that. However, if there's no decimal, I not only need to add a 0, but I need to add a decimal as well. So decimal 0 gets added. That only gets added if there's no current decimal into B10. All right, that's it pretty much for increase. But what about decrease? Decrease is, again, one line. Just one line of code I've added in here. I guess let me make it a little bit easier. Then I'll do an end if and just make it easier so for you to read. Okay, so now it's a little bit easier. So basically what we're saying is if there's currently a decimal does not equal 0, then do what? Then reduce the last character by 1, the last character on the right by 1. We do that. That's the same formula we used above when we're deleting. In this case, we're taking whatever's in B10, we're going to count the number of characters, and then we're going to reduce that by just 1. So we do that right in here. So we can just reduce it all the way until there's no decimal. And when there's no decimal, we got to stop. So if there's no decimal, so this only works if there's a decimal. We're only focusing on this line if there's currently a decimal. This way we stop deleting once there's no decimal. All right, next up we have calculate the decimal. And this is also just a simple macro where we can manually add a decimal here. So that's really nice. But if we add too many, of course, we're going to get this invalid formula. So that's good. We want to make sure we're protected. So we can also add a decimal manually too, and that's the same type of macro. All right, so we've got add. Now we want to add to selected cell. So when we make a calculation here, times 9 equals, I want to be able to add it to cell, and I've used this little icon. This one will add whatever we're on to whatever cell we're in. In this case, we've selected 20 point, this cell down here, but when we're here or in any normal cell, and we want to add those calculations, we can just click add it and it adds it to the cell. And that's pretty easy. All we need to do is calculate it and then take whatever is in here and just put it in the selected cell. So we do that here. The active cell value equals sheet 1 B10 value. That's all we need to do. And then I want to hide the calculator. I'm going to run the macro to hide the calculator. So that's how we add whatever calculations they've made to the selected cell. All right, next up, I'd love to show you how we create these really cool themes. How do we change the theme in this? We've shown you how we reduce this, but how do we create these really cool themes? Well, that's actually really easy, and I can't wait to show that to you because it's a new trick that we haven't used before. The first thing is I've given these each a name. Of course, theme 2, this is called this shape, this is called theme 3, and so on and so forth. So basically all I've done is each individual shape I've just given a color to. So if we look on here, I'm going to click on the format shape. It's off the screen, but it's right click format shape. Basically all I've done is I've just manually given each one a gradient. All I really need to do is change these 6 individual shapes to give them each their own gradient. It's really quite simple. So even if I change, let's say I want to make this orange, let's say I want to make this green one a little bit darker, right? I want to make it a little bit darker. All I need to do is format the shape and make it a little bit darker. Let's say I make it this color, but I want to make it a little bit darker, so I want to give it a good darkening. I can do it just by changing the smaller shape. That's all I need to do is change that sample shape to a little bit darker, like this. And now when I click on this darker shape, the whole thing changes because it's going to copy the format of that miniature square there. It's just going to copy the format and bring it up to the main. So the first thing we need to understand is there's a name I've given to this background. It's called calculator background. That's the name. We're going to focus on that name because that's the one we want to change. The rest of these shapes are pretty much transparent, almost 95% transparent. Format them. Let's look at the fill of each individual shape. Shape fill. I've given it a white color, but I've given the transparency mostly all. So when you click on more fill colors, you see the transparency is 97%. So it's 97, but if we were to reduce that transparency and click OK, you'd see that it wouldn't look very good. So we've given it a 9. That's how I got that color to look just like it. So that works for any, because it's a white front, but the background is filled. So it's you can also change it from here, transparency here as well. So we had it at 97%. Let's make it even. So that is how I give it that kind of a raised button. I've given a slight shadow and a white border. So when we look on it, we look at the shape outline and we click more outline colors. We see also this has a 92% and a white color and a 92% transparency. So it gives it that kind of slight look. So how do we do it? So how do we change this quickly and easily? It's just a very simple macro. So let's go back into the VB code and have a look. If we right click on any one of these shapes, we'll see that there's a macro that's assigned on. I'm going to click on assign macro. It's just down below, assign macro, calculator theme 1, calculator theme 1. And then of course we go theme 2, theme 3. So they're just basic macros that have been assigned. Here they are, it's just 3 lines of code. The first thing is that shape that we just clicked, theme 1 or theme 2. What I want to do is I want to use something called pick up. It's actually like almost like a copy, right? And it actually is going to pick up all the formats of that shape. So very cool. I haven't used that before, pick up, but it's really cool. And in this case, I want to take it and I want to apply whatever we've picked up from theme 1, and I want to apply that to the background shape of the larger calculator. And then what I want to do is I also want to apply that to the back of the settings. Remember, we have 2 background shapes. We have the background of the main calculator here, and we also have the background of the setting here. So I want both of those to be changed. So when we click a macro, both of them get changed. So using that little trick called pick up and apply, and then apply. So all we need to do is pick it up once from wherever we want to. It's simply like a copy, and it's almost like a paste special paste format. Pretty simple, but really easily and great code. So that's it. That's all we have to do for each individual calculator theme. And that gives us the ability to change and look. Now, of course, if we also see that I've given us, if we zoom in and let's take a look at this X, and so you see what that actually is. That is just two different shapes. It's actually a text icon, and if we format down here, I've given it some kind of a font of text box of Arial Black. Here it is, Arial Black. Let's drop this down. Arial Black, and I've given it a 6 and a white font in bold. And then I've just put a red triangle here. So the other shape is simply a red triangle. That's it, just a red triangle is formatted. So I just kind of gave it that kind of a nice. And then to both shapes, I've assigned a macro. So if we click on the macro, and we see again, it's the hide calculator. This gives the user the ability to hide it using this red X. So when we zoom out, pin this back up, we can see that just clicking on it's going to hide that calculator. So this is a really great calculator. It gives you a lot of dynamic flexibility. And also another thing we can do is, here's something I want to do. I want to hide this calculator if they select outside, because if they select something else and then they enter a value, it's probably not very good, right? So why don't we do that? Let's show you how to do that while we're in there. Click on it, but if they select outside this range, I want to hide that calculator. So how do we do that? We can copy the macro, click assign macro, and just click copy. I want to copy the text, and then we can cancel out of that, go back into the VBA code, and we're going to go back into the general journal. Now, not only do I want to hide the calculator icon, but I want to hide the calculator itself. So we hide that calculator. Now we're hiding the calculator icon and the main calculator as well. So if we take a look at this, and now if we select outside, it's gone. And that I think is going to be better, because I don't think, but if they keep selecting inside, if they select inside the range, we're okay. But if they select outside the range, that's much better. So I think we'll keep it like that, and I'll save my changes here. All right, great. So I'm really glad I got to show you this. Keep in mind that these applications are free, and you can download them using the links in the description. I do hope you will subscribe to this channel. I bring you new and unique videos each and every week. Of course, if you would like over 100 applications, I've got all of them in a great bundle and zip file, and that's just $37. So I really appreciate it. That helps keep these trainings free. So if you want to get that, I've also got a 20 workbook bonus for right now, but I'm not sure how long I'm going to keep that open. So go ahead and check the links down below in the description for your 100 workbook zip file. All right, thanks so much. Just 30 minutes on this training, a little bit less, so give you a break during these holidays. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.